podcast eSTEAMd Women. It used to be called Silence and then became Innovation, and finally women are now more empowered than ever to use their voices to express what it's really like to strive and thrive in what tends to be quite an imbalanced and unequal world. I'm sure it hasn't been easy, but these women have achieved and accomplished. They truly are eSTEAMd women who have chosen careers in science, technology and innovation. They're typically go-getters, alpha females, hard-working and maybe even a little bit perfectionistic, but on the whole they've applied their talents and skills to really make a difference. That was certainly my intention when working as a mechanical engineer and fluid dynamicist. In these episodes you'll get a chance to hear about some fascinating innovations, but you're also likely to be inspired and uplifted by the personal stories and experiences of my guests. So let's hear it from my STEM sister, an incredibly esteemed woman, Khaoula Daoud, a process engineer.
My name is Khaoula Daoud, a bit of an odd name. I'm Tunisian and I am a process engineer at an engineering company.
I'm glad you pronounced your name because I was kind of struggling to pronounce it, which is ironic coming from a Sri Lankan girl. But yeah, it is a really unusual name, very beautiful. And I have been really keen to find out what process engineering is. Can you explain?
Of course. So process engineering is actually chemical engineering. Just chemical engineering is the terminology we use more at university, but in the industry it's called process engineering because it's, in a nutshell, the study and the analysis and the design in the chemical processes and the chemical process plants, which is where the word process comes from, because any chemical plant follows normally a process that takes you from a raw product to a final product, and that whole process is what process engineers end up designing. That can expand from equipment sizing, hydraulics, fluid analysis, software simulation, and things like that, without going in the deep end.
Okay, that would explain why I don't know too much about it, because chemistry for me was such a terrifying subject. Are you an expert?
An expert. So I'd say chemical engineering starts with chemistry in the first. I don't know if any people watching are more students. So we do chemistry at the beginning of the degree, and then after is more or less more the fluid analysis, which is kind of similar to the other mainly the mechanical engineering. So we do the analysis of the fluids, but in terms of the chemistry, we analyze things like the chemical composition, the reactions, we size reactors. So there's a branch, there's a chemical engineering and the biochemical engineering, whether you do organic or inorganic chemistry. And I am specialized more in the energy. So I did chemistry in the first year, but more or less specialized more in petroleum industry, and then onwards after to the energy transition industries. But that's the link between the whole engineering and the chemistry in itself, is that we get involved in anything to do chemistry wise in the design. So the chemistry is only the first bit, and then after is more or less the development of the fluid analysis from that.
Are you involved in energy generation after petroleum? Because I'm thinking that energy generation is going into sustainable solutions, and that makes me think of solar panels and wind turbines, and actually maybe even nuclear, which is very chemical.
That's true. So as soon as I finished university, and it was by complete chance because that's where my first job led me to, I was in the deep end with the petroleum industry. And then I did notice myself the change in terms of the project we were receiving, because I transitioned from the first year or two in my career from purely petroleum projects, so gas or oil, onto more of a energy transition projects. The ones that I have personally been involved with were the cathodic materials for the batteries for cars, and anything to do with carbon capture and hydrogen. So obviously, because process engineers, we deal with the chemistry, that's true, we get involved in nuclear, or in terms of the energy transition, the renewable, sort of more of the renewable side of things, we get involved with the carbon capture, the hydrogen, and the batteries. So anything solar and wind farms involves a lot more mechanical and electrical discipline. So the chemical engineers or the process engineers, we do get involved in these range of projects when it comes to energy transition. So at the moment, I am involved with a batteries project. So we're producing the cathodic material for batteries for electric cars in the future, which is really booming at the moment, especially in the UK, because funds have been released for the last few years to allow for this kind of project to be progressed. So I have kind of specialized more into these. This has been, I think, my third project in the span of 2 years that is specialized in this sort of industry. And I find it quite exciting, especially when you're still young, but you're at the beginning of your career. It's nice to find yourself, like, your feet in sort of a new industry, because there is definitely a space to grow in it, because other industries, even nuclear, they have been well established, but these kind of industries, you feel like everyone is learning at the same time, even the senior people, and there is much more space for anybody, frankly, even junior, to progress further up, because you're essentially learning even at the same time as someone senior who has done traditional energies for 30 plus years or so. So I'm finding it super exciting. I'm glad I sort of graduated and I started working when all of this has sort of started happening, all these conversations.
Yeah, it seems like there's a never-ending kind of pursuit to find better batteries.
That's true.
It's totally down to chemicals.
It is. I know. I didn't before. I thought it was electrical, but it's chemical, because the battery has like anode and cathode, not necessarily in the sense of the small batteries, but there are a lot of chemical processes that come into place to even produce those materials. And the way it is they are all of them licensed owns. So it changes from a client to another, because every client that you have a project with have their own recipe on how to make these sort of batteries. And that is so different to the petroleum and traditional side of things, because the petroleum is such an old industry that everything is pretty much traditional. And these kind of projects are very different. The specifications are different. The way the clients execute is different. There is much more sort of movement when it comes to the specification, because it's new. So there's a lot more discussions with the clients, much more dynamic. I find myself in and out of meetings so much more than what I used to, because it's an ongoing conversation even with the client in terms of how to specify the design and how to take the right decisions and so on and so forth. And it's continuously changing. It's an industry that depends a lot on raw materials and certain types of rare minerals and rare metals. And so it's very geopolitically sensitive. And all of that is very interesting from a point of view from the design. So it's a very challenging sort of industry, and to be honest, quite exciting.
Yeah, I mean, when you open up the subject of batteries, we're talking about, like, how do we capture renewable energy like wind and solar, so that when it's not sunny and when it's not windy, we can still have like batteries full of charge. We're talking about trying to keep cars light. We're talking about trying to reduce carbon emissions by not burning fuel and having like battery powered planes. And batteries are so absolutely fundamental. But then it also opens up the debate of, like, when you think about electric batteries and how much they use lithium and all the controversy.
Exactly, true. Yeah.
Lithium, and then also finding and sourcing raw materials in space. I mean, it's a technology that lends itself to a whole host of other technologies. It's just a fascinating space to work in.
Yeah, that is true. And it's genius, continuously evolving, because I think last month or so, I even read like there's this group of engineers, I think they're based somewhere in America, and they found a completely new technology on how to make batteries charge so much faster. Because at the moment, so to charge a car can take you like an hour or so, and that obviously depends on how big the car is, depends on even the broadband that you're using to charge it, depending on how many people in the same area are charging the cars. And this sort of issue is actually deterring a lot of people from potentially going full electric. So a lot of people are still using cars that are hybrid, so electrical / traditional. And there are many reasons, but one of them is that people are not 100% still confident in the reliability of the batteries. And the field is so dynamic that literally it was 2 months ago or so, this group of engineers found a new technology where you can completely speed up the process and you can charge your car within a span of 10 minutes. And like the solutions are not even this kind of complex, but they're just doing experiments because there's so much more interest now and so many more people that are interested in help develop the industry, that they figure out a very simple mechanism that now is being taken further to hopefully commercialize it. And now they're licensing this technology to other big world producers of batteries to help support the industry. And all of this, hopefully, the battery is not perfect right now, exactly as you said yourself. There are still resourcing issue. Even the materials are not very nice and not very environmentally friendly. Exactly like you pointed out, lithium is not the nicest material to source, and even after the batteries, not all of them are recyclable. But quite frankly, I think everyone realized that not even you need an alternative technology that is urgent, but also there is that now, because obviously you've seen there are so many environmental issues. We start seeing them every year is hotter and hotter. So there is so much more people that are not just getting into the industry, but really doing a lot of research to make it really the energy, potentially one of the energies of the future. So at the same time as people are producing the battery, people are continuously studying and trying to make it greener and greener and greener. Because I don't know, do you believe there's only one renewable, one perfect source of energy, like one perfect green, like it's a utopia, isn't it? There's always going to be, isn't it? And it's that drive to balance everything out. So like this industry right now is promising. Obviously it's not perfect, but at the same time, hopefully with another one and another one and another one, they will help us gain much more independence from the traditional oil and gas. And hopefully maybe in the future another technology will be that will be even better than the batteries, but it has to be a balance, isn't it?
A lot about hydrogen. I'm hearing so much about hydrogen,
green and blue.
Yeah, but you know, that's why I find battery technology so fascinating, because there may be all these different ways of generating power, but storing it seems to always come back to batteries. And yes, there can be many variations of batteries, but it's always back to that thing of like, how do we store that energy that we're generating or collecting? I must say, listening to you, I'm excited for you, because you really are in kind of like an awesome sort of slice of the engineering sector, in the sense that climate change is so topical, and sustainability is like the hot word in engineering. Like all engineering solutions are now built to be sustainable, and hearing you talk about it, you know, and seeing you talk about it, it's like, oh my God, you are so badass. So I mean, given that you absolutely do not fit the stereotype and you make engineering look amazing and cool, you know, what inspired you to go into an industry where you're really not the common stereotype?
Honestly, well, because you're a STEM lady yourself, so I think like initially I liked like maths. And I just thought, I feel lucky that I like, as a lot of people don't. And I know it's one of those things that can take you to pretty much a lot of career routes. So like if you like anything STEM, and it's quite, how can I say, I'm not saying anything special, but it's true. STEM disciplines, STEM modules can take you to a lot of different career paths. So I just found I liked other things, but maths, I was like, it's, it's got a good balance. I enjoy it, but also I know it can take me somewhere. And then, to be frankly honest, I'm Tunisian, had my baccalaureate, I didn't, at the time, I still didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. Quite frankly, I knew that anything STEM could take me somewhere where I could have a career, and not just, it's not just taboo, but even from a financial point of view and also from a career progression point of view. And I knew that engineering was one of those career paths. You can do engineering and do a lot of things with it. So it stemmed from, I'd say, these two things. So I felt comfortable and I enjoyed more like the maths and physics of things. But it was kind of a conscious choice to be like, I'd go down this route because I don't know exactly what I want to do, but with this route, I can potentially go to other routes. And then when I was at university, I enjoyed it even more and more. There are so many ladies she knew with me even on my course. Yes, I went to Newcastle and I swear we were at least 40% girls. 40% girls. Yeah. And a lot of people like this is uncommon, but I think more and more girls, especially I think Chem-Eng, I think mechanical and electrical were very male dominated much more because it's the more traditional sort of disciplines. But Chem-Eng, I remember there was a lot of my girlfriends did Chem-Eng with me, and a lot of them ended up going not necessarily energy, but some nuclear and oil and gas and whatever not, but a lot went into products, like shampoos and cosmetics and more the chemistry side of things, specialized more in pharmaceutical products and so on. And I think that is the main reason I chose chemical engineering specifically, because also from the other engineering, it had the maths, the physics, but also the chemistry. So I was like, okay, that's another thing that I can figure myself out if that is what I want to do. And then even that's how it started. And then when I got my degree, I went again and pretty much a very global company on purpose, because I work in a multinational engineering corporation where we get a lot of projects from a lot of different fields internationally. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to go to a corporation that way, because again, it would offer me the chance to even get to know exactly what I want. And I've enjoyed it so far. It's been challenging, but I've learned so much. And that is the reason, quite frankly, I don't know if engineering, technology will be my forever career. So far, it feels like it's the right thing, and it came from a lot of smaller decisions. So it's just a message. If some people are like, oh my God, I didn't know this is, and I know a lot of my friends, some stayed technical, but not doing engineering, technical in other aspects. But it is definitely one of the routes. Engineering is one of the routes that you can build yourself from doing pretty much anything else, because it has the technical skills, which is an achievement to have the technical abilities, but also requires a lot of soft skills. It requires you to be able to speak your ideas, to convince, to show confidence in anything you write, anything you've designed. This, I've sued. But it is true. And all of those, you can get them from a lot of other jobs and other, frankly, but engineering is one of those that does sort of equip you with all of those things. And being an 18-something-year-old, and also I'm Tunisian, and in Tunisia, and there's that preconception that you have to do something STEM, which is, I know, weird, because I think in other countries that's not the case, but it's regardless of whether you're a boy or a girl, it's an achievement to go technical, which I know a lot of people end up being surprised. But because obviously Tunisia is not very stable financially, so the only way for you to have good potential careers to go technical and, I don't know, medicine or engineering. And so it's not uncommon actually for girls that look like me in my home country to end up doing STEM. And I'm glad it's only getting better over the years. I think, and you can agree with me, Sheeny, I think an imbalance. There's always more men. And I think even if there are ladies who study it, a lot of ladies over time leave the STEM route, I think. And that is I think there is a lot of factors. That discussion is another whole discussion in itself.
That is a topic that I hope that we get to within this
Sounds
hour.
Good.
But so it doesn't sound like being in engineering is like this, that you're some outlier on the graph, you know. So it's not crazy unusual that you're in engineering. But what I would love to know is, at work and being in industry, being a woman, because wherever you are on the planet, we do live in a very patriarchal, dominated society.
Yeah.
You know, globally, most cultures are very patriarchal. So given that you're a woman in engineering, how have you carried yourself? Like, how have you allowed yourself to gain the respect of your probably male-dominated peers?
Honestly, and thank you for asking the question. When I joined, Ashini, there was a group of us, boys and girls, and I was the only girl from sort of my discipline. And even though we all had the similar qualifications, we all had degrees, first, masters, whatever, there is still that preconception that you're still maybe filling shoes that are bigger than yours. I don't know how to describe it. You always feel that, because even though I am doing STEM, for example, the boys have always had a natural interest in anything like cars related or whatever. I don't know if it's a women preconception, but I always, even though I had I knew I could do the job, there is always that feeling, oh, I know he'll get it and it'll take me a bit longer to get it. And that sort of, those barriers that I think, talking from myself, but I know potentially some ladies have this preconception as well, is, I don't know, we believe that I have to second guess myself much more. That, to be honest, took time. And also, I think you need to have the right professional environment for that side of things to sort of, I don't want to say be fixed, to sort of develop. I think one of the good things is my company, quite genuinely, we have a lot of ladies, not just in STEM, but also having leadership roles. So when you see another woman who's holding, I don't know, your boss or even your department, my department manager is a lady right now, she's even holding roles in the corporate level. There's a subconscious, I don't know how to describe, a subconscious thing that you do, you're like, okay, it's feasible. It's really feasible. I remember when I did an internship, it was like ages ago, it was like 7 years ago, when I was still a student, and the company was all men. The ladies had, I think, sales or more like, yeah, sales or HR, or with nothing wrong with these roles. But I remember there wasn't a lady holding technical roles. And when I joined my company, that was different. Even when I was interviewed by ladies, not because, oh, she's a woman, she gets to be interviewed by women, because that's just how it is. And then I realized the barrier was essentially personal, of like, oh, I don't know how to describe it. Oh, can I do it? He knows. And that, to be honest, went away with time, because you realize you really can do it. You really can do it. You can.
There's this common saying, I think it started in America, in Australia or New Zealand, if you can see it, you can be it.
Exactly. Like, I come every day, and like my colleagues, like, I was stuck in a meeting all day, super intense meeting, and in the room there was 3 women and 1 boy. He was outnumbered, and we were all 3 process engineers ladies, and our colleague was a man. Nothing to say all women are. Like, I like to think that we're all equal. I'm kind of sometimes against saying, oh, let's have an all-female team, or because even that kind of saying, I feel even, I don't know, segregates women more. Like, there's no, I'm just an engineer at my company. I don't want to be thought of, oh, a lady. I'm just an engineer. Frankly, even with my name, some people, because they're not familiarized with it, they call me sir or something, like if I'm working internationally. And I don't really care, because like on paper, I'm an engineer. And that's what I kind of tried to work on myself to get to. Like, I'm an engineer. And then another thing is aspect, I suppose, just showing your feminine side. So like, when in a male dominated office, I think sometimes we women, we tend to not be too feminine, not in a conscious way. I'm not going to be too feminine. I'm not going to wear heels. I'm not going to, because I just wanted to think that I'm serious. But it's nothing to do. That it's not related. It's not at all related. Even if people have certain preconceptions, it's time to make that change. Like, an engineer doesn't look this way for people to think that they can do their job the proper way, if that makes sense. All of those things have been a learning curve, and it still is a learning curve. And yeah, I'd say it's a combination of yourself and also the environment you're in, and how much you're feeding into that environment, because changing your behavior also shows to other women how it's best to be, how it's best to act, all that kind of stuff. That's how I think anyway.
I really understand what you're saying. And I'm so happy for you that you are really aware of those potentially negative thought processes that some women go through, of like this idea of your awareness of self-doubt.
Even without realizing, like literally sometimes without you realizing.
Yeah.
Until like we're having this conversation, me and you, some people need conversations like this to even be like, oh yeah, because it's been going on for so many years that it's just for you the way to be.
Yeah, but it's great that you are aware of it, because by being aware of it, you can catch yourself if you are ever slipping into self-doubt. I slip into self-doubt all the time, and I've been aware of it for a long time, but sometimes you just have habits, you kind of slip into a role that you've been raised with, where for example, like I apologize a lot, and then I'll catch myself and I'll be like, why am I saying sorry for demanding that I get paid a certain amount?
I only realized this recently, Sheeny, this saying sorry so automatically that we shouldn't. And I think it's still taboo, but we shouldn't, because I don't know, I feel it's all in subconscious. Like, it makes people think that but no, you don't. You apologize when you need to, but you don't need to over.
Yeah. I mean, over the decades, because I really am that old, that over the decades, I have seen women change their approach to how they present themselves at work. So early on in my sort of engineering days, I saw the very, very few women that were in senior positions at work presenting themselves as masculine, like they were trying to be one of the boys. And cut 2 decades later, and I see women actually being proud, of their multi-dimensions, and and I think it's a combination of like what's been happening in the greater society. We've got like more female presidents, we've got more women in leadership roles, and they're having children, and they're doing all these different things that women can do. And I think other women look at them and think, wow, they can do it all.
Do it.
So where do you sit in that sort of like plan for yourself, in terms of, because women have many dimensions, and being in a very male dominated industry has meant in the past that you have to compromise. Where are you to compromise?
So very interesting. This is another very interesting topic, because I feel even the things we're ready to compromise on change even with your age. Like the things I used to feel it's okay to compromise on, not anymore now, and probably will not be in 5 years' time.
Like what?
Like I don't know, to be honest, even the same, I like to have a good work-life balance, to be honest. I remember when I was at university and when I started work, that kind of slipped. I was like, I need to prove myself. I need to, because the more you prove yourself, the more you get the right opportunities, that you perceive them at the time to be right. And you're ready to compromise on things. They were compromises at the time. They were, like, for you made a choice. And I feel now I'm not like that anymore. It's so important for me to have that good work-life balance. And I think it's sad that it took me the pandemic, to be honest, to realize it. But that is a compromise that I'm not ready to not compromise on. So like,
Yeah.
let's see, and it's funny because obviously the more you progress, the more you have like workload and more responsibilities, and you have to be held more accountable than you used to. But it's so important. I used to, for example, if I don't know, it's the Friday, I've done my hours and everything, I would still after work stress about, oh, I should have done this, should have done this. Now I'm able to do that complete disconnection. Like when I finish work, that's it. Like, yes, my job, I'm happy to be the worker that I am. I'm happy to be the colleague that I am. But outside of working hours, I'm not a colleague, and I'm not an engineer working at X. I'm not. I'm other things. And that kind of barrier, I don't know if it's a ladies thing or not. When I started, when I was studying, when I started working, that barrier was very blurry. And I feel like there's a certain confidence that gets built over time that allows you to sort of make that barrier bold, that line much bolder with time. So that is something. It's just funny, Shini, because when you start, you don't have as much responsibilities, but yet you let work slip more into your personal life. But then the right thing is, the more it gets intense, the more it's important to have that barrier. And that's always my homework. It's been my homework since the pandemic. It's tough. Honestly, it's tough because I don't know, exactly as you said, like women, I don't like to say, oh, as women, probably some men do, where you just feel like you can always do more. Like, I feel it's not just a women thing. This, I think, a bit more for the ladies. We compare yourself in a not very justifiable, oh, he's doing more, but it's true, it's for everyone. That kind of barrier between work and life has never been more important, especially after the pandemic. So many people got laid off of their jobs, lost their businesses, lost the corporations, and the companies continued on, but people lost their jobs. And it's that highlighted for me that I didn't want, to be honest, compromise the personal to the work. And I think those kind of barriers only make you a better engineer, like an engineer in general, who can sort of separate those things, can only be a better engineer. So that's where I stand. Work in progress. Work in progress.
I find that the older I get, the more I kind of look at, I'm more self-reflective. And I kind of, I look at the bigger picture. Last night I was at a dinner and I was sitting next to someone who was 35, who had a very different career, which he had decided that he was going to stop doing that career and try something brand new, and was kind of doing a master's, and it just felt like a total 180. And because I'm older, I was just so excited for him, because I feel like careers do twist and change and adapt and all of that. But at the time, there's so much lack of experience, lack of confidence that comes with the lack of experience. And also like an uncertainty of like life choices and right and wrong and all of that. And I do find that the older you get, the more you are able to zoom out and just go, it's part of life's tapestry.
Totally.
But when you're super young, like a new graduate, or making decisions on whether to take a STEM career or not, like you just think,
feel it's one way. It's just one freaking highway.
You know that. With that said, it is kind of one highway when it comes to, say, motherhood. Like, what are your perspectives on that whole aspect of being a woman?
As in, that is super, you know, it's a topic that comes up a lot with my girlfriends. I mean, it's men don't have to do this. For men, it's, and I'm not saying all boo man, not in a very objective manner. They don't have to compromise on that, okay? They can have kids, and that does not necessarily impact their careers. For women, we have to choose whether it's going to impact or not, okay? So that sort of unfair choice, it isn't some people consider, because we're not 100% equal with men when it comes to that. We have to compromise on that. And I found it interesting because a lot of women have different opinions when it comes to that. Some women decide to take a step back completely and focus on motherhood. Some women decide to try to fully take care of kids and not change anything when it comes to their career path. Some women decide to do a completely different career that allows them much more flexibility. Some women decide that they don't want to have kids. They sacrifice that sort of natural need for the careers. And I think I'm 29. I'm around my 30s, and it's a topic that comes up, I think, even in the discussion with my friends on what's the right thing. I don't think there is a right thing. I think it just needs like planning. I think every lady owes to herself to really think about that beforehand and think, you know, understand that if you decide to have kids, then there are changes that might be happening. And it's a different discussion that you have with yourself, because sometimes that entails breaking a dream that you had or an idea that you had you would be at. A lot of us thought we would be with kids at 20, 25, 27. You realize, you're still trying to figure it out in your 20s. Yeah. You get to your 30, like, oh my gosh, I'm starting to make it. No, I don't want it to stop because I've just started to make it. Yeah. But I think, thankfully, because work has become more digitalized, a lot of women now have been able to accomplish that by working more online, going more contractor, developing like side hustles and things like that. And I think we're so lucky when it comes to the options that we have now, where before we didn't. And there are more companies that are much more women friendly. So even if a lady goes for her maternity leave, when she comes back, that does not compromise necessarily her career progression. Some companies, you know, they take if a woman goes out for maternity leave, then when she comes back, she's not as good as she used to, she's lacking practice. And I think that is where the real work needs to be done. And I think different companies do things differently. But there's no right answer. There is no, it's, I don't know, a discussion that every woman needs to have with herself. Right, in terms of
it's so listening to you and speaking to you, because like the best engineers I know, you have such a clear thought process. It's just so logical and clear, and just
you're a good listener. You're a good listener, Charles.
So really, really happy for you, by the way, that you are 29 at a time where society is really embracing the role of women. Because, you know, you are doing something that was traditionally reserved for men, and you're stepping into that traditionally masculine territory, but you're coming with you're stepping on that territory with a kind of empowerment that only comes with an allowance to just be yourself. Like, you're not, I don't hear you trying to shove yourself into certain categories or molds or templates.
I think it's like you have to do that. I think it's much easier not to, right? It's much easier not to, because when you stuff yourself into like roles. You almost need to learn by heart what you should and what you should not do. And you're just in this automatic sort of way of doing things. And then one day you realize, oh my God, what have I been doing my whole life? So I think that it's much harder to do that. And I think a lot of people sometimes don't get to that lucky place of spotting that they're doing that. They don't realize that they're doing that. And I think...
How come you're not doing that? Because a lot of people do that. How come, what stopped you from doing that?
I think I'm honestly just, I try as much as I can to be in tune with myself, realizing that what you thought was right 2 years ago might not be right 2 years from now. And having that continuous checkup with yourself to be like, okay, am I still enjoying this? Where do I want to go with this? Am I not? I think a lot of people talk about happiness. I don't like, because happiness is not like, oh, am I happy doing this? I think it's much more of, is it aligned? What do I want to do with this? What is it doing for me? This job or what? And it comes with anything with life, job, choices, partners, whatever it is it working for me? And this question is super easy to ask ourselves, but super hard to answer, because a lot of people, they can ask, oh, is it working for me? But then, oh yeah, of course it's working for me. And sometimes it just takes that. Sometimes it's sad, it's triggered by, I don't know, someone reaching their breaking point. Sometimes it just affects someone's mental health. It affects, sometimes some people need those kind of triggers to get to that sort of realization. And as far as I am aware, what helps me is, to be honest, to always think, where am I going? Where am I going? Am I going where I want to go? Do I know what I want to go? If I want to go A instead of B, okay, why do I want to go to A instead of B? And if I want to go to A, what should I do to take me to A? And like these kind of things with yourself, and also the conversation with the right people. I feel lucky all of my friends were kind of at this similar age, doing different things, which is nice, but similar age. And these conversations come up often. And I feel I dropped the mental health, but there was a time where it affected my mental health for me to make a change, if I can say. And I think we are at a point, I think everyone must have some point been affected within their mental health, but now it's become much easier to talk about it, much less taboo. But I got to a point in the past where it affected me when it comes to my mental health. And since then, I decided I need to be actively checking on myself, if that makes sense. I'm not saying it works every time. Sometimes it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I'm like, what's wrong with me? And I have no idea. And that is fine, as long as you ask yourself that question. Yeah. And to have the open minds of like, even if what I'm saying is not the absolute truth, but for now it's working for me. Does that make sense? And to just be gentle with yourself. Like, I feel, and I think this, coming back to the women, we tend to be super, like, have the imposter syndrome. A lot of men are like, oh no, but it is true. It is true, because I think it must be with the way we perceive thoughts. Like, we are perfectionists. Like, a lot of women are perfectionists by nature, not just to do with their jobs, in their relationships, with themselves, with their bodies, what they eat, with their friendships, with their future, with their plans. And I think we deserve to be a bit more gentle when it comes to that. And one last point is, I think, yes, conversations with ladies are nice, but conversation with men are also nice, because they do a lot of things right with themselves that would be good if we do with ourselves. So conversations about women are very interesting and very helpful, even with men, if that makes sense, with the right ones.
Yes, that's a really, really fundamental point, because there is a lot to learn from men, and this isn't a conversation to put men down or no. I hear a lot about the importance of diversity in work and in your life. Not once have I heard any kind of message that women are more superior or men are more superior or anyone's superior. I just really see you embracing inclusivity, you know, everyone's included. And I love the fact that you make the point about talking and connecting with others, regardless of their gender, because there is a lot to learn from one another. And that's really, really a strong message of yours, is that, it's so important to put your oxygen mask on first before helping others, is what comes to mind. You really have always kind of gone back to your center of gravity every time you've spoken, as though, it's not about trying to change the world. It's about really just getting aligned with ourselves, and that's where the empowerment stems from. It's been an absolute joy to speak with you, because...
Joy was mine. Thank you, Jean.
Do you know what comes out so clearly is that you are one hell of an amazing process engineer, because it's the way you think, and I just like,
Thank you, Jean. Thank you for the conversation. It takes two to tango. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for listening, and please do subscribe to this podcast, and maybe even rate and review it if you can. The more ratings and reviews, then the more interest from those trusty algorithms, which could help to increase the reach of this show. And you can watch the video recording of this conversation on YouTube for my new series called eSTEAMd Women. It's all about self-discovery and self-evolution on innovation. So as always, be kind and loving to yourselves, and I wish you all a great week.